This is Podcasting Seeds, a podcasting guide for faith leaders and churches. You're listening to the narrated articles from my email newsletter of the same name. I'm David Kelso. Today is July 9th, 2023. The perfect recipe for podcast show notes. Show notes are often a half-baked portion of the podcast recipe. You start writing it one way on your first episode, and by episode 3, you start to forget how you wrote the first 2 episodes. By episode 5, you're off the rails completely and start to ask yourself, do show notes really matter? Who actually looks at these things anyways? I look at them, and I look at them often, but they are often riddled with broken links, non-descriptive baloney, and no connection to other content. In this episode, I'm going to explore why show notes matter, the best recipe for show notes, and how to keep them consistent from episode to episode. Why show notes matter. Before people even get to the main entree of your actual audio, they get the appetizers, your title, show notes, and description. Many new listeners look at show notes before tapping the play button. If the summary doesn't intrigue them, sorry, but you're not getting in their queue. The only person that looks at your show notes 100% of the time? Search engines, listening platforms. In the ever-expanding world of automated lists and search results, show notes help people find your show through those search platforms. Yes, some platforms are transcribing your audio content word for word to make it more searchable, but not all of them. The cherry on top, show notes are a great way to provide direct links to resources too complicated to say on mic or type into a search bar. The ingredients for good podcast show notes. Title. Even before someone sees your show notes, they see your title. Although not normally included as show notes, title plays a role with them. There are lots of different philosophies for titling shows. I believe it's something you'll develop over time for yourself, and it really has to do with your personality. Here are some general rules of thumb. Number 1, keep it short, under 54 characters. Number 2, create intrigue with truth, no clickbait. And number 3, showcase your guest's name. Short description. This is your time to shine. Use all those words you held back from your title and continue that intrigue. Why would your ideal listener want to listen to this episode? What are the major themes, ideas, or interests shared or discussed? Try to sum it up in 1 to 2 sentences. I recommend writing the description as soon as you finish recording so the whole conversation is fresh in your mind. Alternatively, you could use a transcription service so you can read through it, or an AI tool to write episode descriptions for you. Here are 4 tips for writing better descriptions. Number 1, study other show notes. Check out the Apple or Spotify charts or your favorite podcasts to see how they're doing it. Top YouTubers are also skilled at writing descriptions, so try there as well. Number 2, use highly specific words. Why use many word when few do trick? Rather than using a full sentence to describe something, does a single word exist to describe it? Number 3, use more interesting words. Thesaurus.com is your friend. Merriam-Webster's word of the day could also be your friend. If you fill up on gas at Quick Trip here in the Midwest, you could get GSTV's word of the day. Number 4, use highly emotional words. Emotional words pull people in. Try using an emotional wheel to find better emotional adjectives. The next ingredient, episode-specific links. These links change every episode, if they're even there. This could be Bible verses mentioned. I use links to Bible Gateway personally. I'll link to the video version of the sermon or episode, or other resources to dive deeper into the conversation. Next, guest info. If you do interviews, it is courtesy to add your guest's bio and links to the show notes. However, guests should provide their own bio and links. I would ask them to keep it to 1 or 2 links, a link to their website where everything else can be found, and or a link for a specific call to action like signing up for a newsletter, a book sample, or some other incentive your listeners get free. The next ingredient is connected media. Podcasts should never be siloed. They should draw your community closer to God and closer to each other. So use links to your church website, a connection form, your small group sign up, your other social media accounts, and anything else you think will help your community do that. Make sure to add a small tagline so people have clear expectations of what they're clicking. For example, if I were to add a link to our small groups page, I'd write looking for a small group ? Or join a small group today. The final ingredient, credits. Give credit to where credit is due. If you have a team helping you bring your podcast to the world, list them here. If you're using Creative Commons licensing for music or other media assets, list them here. If you want to keep your show notes as short as possible, you could link to a page on your website with the credits as well. A quick note, every good chef knows a recipe can be altered, so can your show notes. Add a sprinkle more of this, a little less of that. Again, it goes back to the goals for your show. A footnote on consistency. 75% of show notes stay the same from episode to episode. I recommend bookmarking a Google Doc or Notion page with your show notes template with all your hyperlinks and info. Build it out with all the ingredients listed above, and use placeholder text for the parts that change every episode. A major challenge with most hosting platforms is their show notes are static. Let's say you get 50 episodes into your podcast and you need to change your website. Easy enough to do moving forward, but now you've got 50 episodes of backlog to scrub through and edit that link. Time-consuming and boring, to say the least. That's why I love and personally use Captivate FM, because they have an awesome show notes feature that solves those issues. The first is a default show notes, which will automatically insert your show notes template you created on a new episode. The second is a dynamic snippets. These are code words that are linked to phrases you can edit in the backend. So if you update your website or add a new social media account like Threads, you can add it to the code word in your backend and it will update your entire backlog as long as you actually use the code word in each one. I hope you put these tips into practice and serve up some show notes to make your community happy. Your task now, go to your favorite podcast, screenshot the show notes of an episode, send it to me, and tell me what you think works and what doesn't. I'd love to see your favorite shows and your thoughts. And if you'd like more coaching like this, plus episode ideas, Jesus-centered podcast recs, and industry news actually relevant to you, then sign up for my email newsletter, Podcasting Seeds. Get all that a week ahead of time, including a private podcast feed for narrations like this. My goal is to help you make Christ known and cultivate the spiritual development of your community with podcasts. Sign up today and get my free guide to being a great podcast guest along with some other goodies. Link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.